When my daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eyes across my own kitchen island and said, "You only hold our lives back," I felt my knees go weak. The pot roast was still steaming, the cornbread cooling beside the butter, and my son Daniel stared at his plate like it might save him. I steadied myself on the countertop I've wiped 1,000 times and took a breath that tasted like rosemary and regret. Then I said the one thing I had never said out loud, and the room went so quiet I could hear the ice maker drop a cube. By the time I finished, Ashley's mascara had bled into little rivers and Daniel's shoulders were shaking. If you want to know what I said, you need to know how we got to that table in the first place. My name is Margaret, but most people in our Ohio suburb call me Maggie, and at 66, I thought I'd seen every kind of storm. When Daniel brought Ashley home from Indiana University 10 years ago, I baked an apple pie and dug out my mother's quilt for the guest room. Ashley had the brightest smile in the room at Thanksgiving, and I remember thinking, maybe this is the daughter I never had. I taught 3rd grade for 30 years, packed lunches with love notes, and saved for a rainy day in a coffee tin no one knew about. After my husband passed, my routine became my anchor. Morning walks past maple trees, church choir on Wednesdays, and Friday bingo at the rec center. Family dinner on Sundays was my joy, the one tradition I guarded like the recipe for my grandmother's pecan pie. Most mornings start the same. Drip coffee hissing in the machine, a bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar, and the local paper folded to the crossword. I hum along to old Motown tracks while I set out tiny socks in a lunchbox because 3 days a week I watch my grandson while they work. I pack his PB&J the way Daniel liked it, crusts off, triangle cut, and tuck in a sticker that says, "You've got this," as if it's armor. I keep a drawer of Band-Aids and dinosaur gummies, keep their Costco list on my fridge, and keep my opinions to myself. On good days, Ashley texts a quick, "Thanks." On others, she moves through my house like TSA, scanning for ways I've slowed her flight. I answer with casseroles and rides to pediatric appointments, the small kindnesses that feel like prayers whispered over a boiling pot. It started with little things. My framed family photos swapped for abstract prints, the quilt folded away because it was too busy for their minimalist vibe. When their apartment lease ended and money got tight, I offered my spare bedroom, not knowing a welcome could feel like a spotlight on every flaw. Ashley is quick, efficient, and fiercely ambitious, and somewhere along the way, my careful, slower rhythm became evidence in her case against me. If I folded laundry, it was wrong. If I read a bedtime story, it was too long. If I offered advice, it was unsolicited and from another era. If you've ever been told your years of love are an inconvenience or that your kindness makes you a burden, you'll understand what came next. Stick with me, because respect doesn't have an expiration date, and silence is not the price of a seat at your own table. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss how a grandmother who bakes casseroles can still lay down a boundary like a gavel. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that family is supposed to be a harbor, not a hurricane. I'm ready to tell you exactly what I said and why it made everyone cry. Here's how we got to that table, and why the words tasted like they were scraped off the bottom of a burned pan. The table itself matters. It's old oak, hand-sanded by my father in a garage that smelled like turpentine and summer sweat, back when my bangs were blunt and my knees were always scabbed. There's a dark water ring from a lemonade pitcher in '83 and a shallow groove where Daniel, age 8, pressed too hard on his math homework with a mechanical pencil. There's a little scorch mark near the edge from a candle I forgot to blow out one Advent because I was crying over the choir singing, O come, Emmanuel." This table has been an altar, a lecture hall, a stage, and sometimes a quiet confessional where tears pooled and nobody had to pretend they weren't there. If this house has a heart, it beats in the grain of that wood. When Daniel and Ashley moved in, for a few months, just until we land in a better spot, I set 2 new placemats at the table, navy blue with a little stitched border. Ashley bought a cork-colored runner that slid under everything like a placid river, and though it wasn't my taste, I smiled and let it anchor the centerpiece. "Clean lines," she said, smoothing it as if she were ironing with her palm. "It helps a space breathe." I started moving her things to the side when I needed to knead dough. She started moving my basket up to the top of the fridge. "Less clutter," she would say. Not unkindly, not kindly either. "We're streamlining." She held up a can of cream of mushroom soup between 2 fingers like she'd caught a spider. "Does anybody still eat this?" She made a little tisk noise with her tongue, which reminded me of a metronome in a lesson my 3rd graders never wanted to finish. The can went into a brown paper bag, which she labeled "Donate" in neat block letters. She found my coffee tin behind the flour, buried under napkins and a jar of pecans I'd shelled in October. It's an old Maxwell House can with a dented side from where it fell out of the cupboard during a spring cleaning around the time Judith Miller was on my news. Inside, I had lined it with a plastic bag and layered bills, small and big, in rubber bands that had once lived a life around broccoli stems. "What's this?" She laughed. Not meanly, not sweetly either, shaking it like a maraca so the money thudded dully inside. "A literal rainy day fund? We could set you up with an index fund, or at least a high-yield savings. At scale, these choices matter." She turned off the pot roast once while I was in the backyard deadheading petunias because she read an article about carcinogens in browned meat. "We don't need to scorch it," she said, when the meat was still stiff in the middle and the house did not smell like Sunday. She replaced my wool dryer balls with a set of white plastic things with hexagons like a soccer ball and told me to stop using softener sheets because toxins. She stopped using my washcloths and bought a dozen gray microfiber cloths she folded into triangles and arranged in a drawer as if they were part of a complicated flag station at a yacht club. She took down the photo of Daniel at 6, wearing a giant paper turkey on his head, and put up a framed print of a circle in a square. "Mid-century modern," she said, tapping the plexiglass like one might test a fish tank. The turkey photo went into a drawer face down, little eyes in the construction paper gobbler peeking toward the wood. I took it out when she left for a conference in Chicago and set it back above the mantel. She put it back in the drawer when she returned. We did this for 3 cycles, like 2 children testing a mother's patience. In the end, the circle in the square stayed. Daniel tried in his way. He would come home from the lab smelling faintly like ethanol and answer my "how was your days" with sentences that had commas like worry beads. "It's fine," he said when he could see from my face that it wasn't. "She's just under pressure." The investor call got ugly. The grants are slow right now. He is a kind man, and kind men sometimes think kindness is a blanket thick enough to muffle every blow. Once he put a hand on Ashley's knee after she made fun of the way I pronounced quinoa and said, "Babe." No more. That night she slept rigid, a tablet glowing like a blue aquarium on her chest. By spring, my grandson had learned to press little fingerprints on the sliding glass door at exactly his height. I would spend nap time Windexing, first up and down, then side to side, and then hold my breath as I watched the streaks vanish. "Don't," Ashley said, watching me through her ring light. "It's like you're erasing him." I blinked, unsure, and put the bottle away. The next day she wiped the door on a Zoom break, left a couple of perfect toddler clouds, and told Instagram she had read an article about fostering sensory experiences. On Thursdays, after choir, I'd sit in my friend Loretta's Ford in the church parking lot and count the steps my watch said I walked that day until the number stopped thrumming in my ears. Loretta is a tall woman with shoulders like a swimmer and a laugh that pops open your ribs. She listens like a surgeon. Eyes narrowed, hands still, nothing wasted. "How are the kids?" she'd ask, and I would tell her which kids I meant that week. "They're busy," I said once, which is what you say when the size of your worry would break the grocery scale. "It's so different now, Loretta. Everything is a production. When Daniel was a baby, I wiped his face with a dishcloth and nobody wrote think pieces about it. She's efficient. Nothing wrong with efficient. But sometimes I feel like I live in a factory." Someone had circled a paragraph about independent living cottages with a felt tip. "Yes," I said carefully. Loretta tapped her nail against the steering wheel. "I only ask because I saw Ashley talking to Mary Ann in the fellowship hall about the new wing. You know Mary Ann does their PR. She said something about timelines and deposit windows. I didn't mean to overhear." "Did she say my name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "People talk. It doesn't prove anything." Loretta looked at me and I could see the moment she decided. "Yeah," she said. "But it could be nothing. It could be she was asking for a friend." We looked at each other. In our town, no one asks for themselves. "I love you," she added. "Don't let your mind go doing gymnastics on you. Just ask questions." I asked Daniel that night in the kitchen while the dishwasher hummed like a faraway bee. "What do you know about Maple Grove?" She likes plans A through G in a spreadsheet. It helps her feel safe. We wake up next to people who talk about return on investment while we are buttering toast. We share bathrooms with people who say, "We're going to throw out all your spices because they're expired. We can start fresh." And when you open the cupboard, there's just a neat row of jars that all smell like nothing. There was the time she optimized my fridge. I came home from produce day at Kroger, and she had the jars lined up with the labels facing out like a commercial, the fruits and vegetables in clear bins so the colors looked like a countertop magazine spread. The potato salad I'd made from my mother's church cookbook was in the trash, the lid left on top like a hat. "Mayonnaise-based salads are high risk," she said when she saw me see. She was on a call, AirPods in, voice pitched bright and precise. She made a little typing motion with her fingers as if that explained everything. "Not for us," I said, picking up the container. "We've survived them." Mags. After the baby bumped his head on the coffee table and I'd scooped him like a firefighter and kissed him 3 times and blessed him without meaning to, don't be dramatic. Each Mags moved something without my permission, like when you watch a diner waitress rearrange your napkin and fork even though you set them the way you like. I'm not a fool. I can tell the difference between a personality clash and something with fangs. The first time I saw her open my mail, she thought I wasn't watching. She had my water bill in her hand. I told myself it was an honest mistake. The envelope was cream, like the ones addressed to Daniel's Consulting, and had no obvious return address. "Oops," she said, slipping it into a pile like the card shell game I never win. "I didn't mean—" Later that week, I noticed a sticky note in her tidy script on the inside of the pantry door. "Autopay?" with 3 question marks. I peeled it off and tucked it into the junk drawer with the rubber bands and lone screws I can't throw away because I just know something in this house is 1 screw away from falling in half. The Sunday before it all came to a head, the church bells were lazy with heat. I basted a chicken, rubbed the skin with paprika and butter, and set a pie to cool by the window, because that's what my hands do when worry paces around my ribs. They both came in late, whispering to each other as if volume could hide truth. When I called everyone to the table, Ashley swiped the phone from Daniel, looked at the screen, and said, "We'll be quick. Our realtor wants to hop on a call at 3. The ring light clicked on with a little sound like a mouse. I went in to remove the gravy boat before it cooled into a skin. On the table, next to her immaculate planner and a pen that probably cost more than my grocery budget when I was 30, was a manila folder half open. I have spent years telling children, if it's not yours, don't touch it. But I also taught them to read. And sometimes the letters don't wait for permission. Maple Grove application. M. Ellison was typed at the top in a sans serif so clean it made my teeth ache. Underneath was a printout of my name with my birthday, and a box checked independent with support. A copy of my driver's license, a little skewed as if the corners didn't want to lay flat, stapled to the back. I don't remember agreeing to that photocopy. Maybe it was for the bank? Maybe Daniel? Beneath was a sheet labeled Financial Profile with my mortgage status, paid, my bank listed, First Federal, and a line under Assets, Primary Residence, Estimated Value, with a number that looks like Monopoly money. Retirement savings, modest. Other savings, and my breath hitched. Someone had typed a total that did not match any account I'd discussed, but sat like a guess someone had made after rifling through a Maxwell House can. There were notes in the margins in a slanted hand I didn't recognize as hers. Talking points, safety, socialization, less strain on us, RE, childcare, plus logistics. Next to assets, a star, unlock value, down payment for condo, or seed funding, talk to D. D. Daniel, my boy. Also in there, clipped behind a page with a realtor logo I know from yard signs around the block, was a comparative market analysis for my house. Photos taken from angles that flattered the kitchen I heard her call outdated last week, labeled potential. A bulleted list suggested listing as is or light staging. In the margin, declutter personal items, photos, quilts, tchotchkes. Then, in her tidy print, an underlined line, M. Ear sentimental, might resist. I flipped the page with hands that felt borrowed. There, paper clipped in the pocket, a receipt. Non-refundable hold fee, Maple Grove Cottage 7B. Amount $1,500. Paid in, cash. I put my fingers to my mouth. I have counted that cash for years, little piles that smelled faintly like ink and kitchen. I keep track like a miser and a grandmother whose hands can still carry heavy casseroles. What feels safe? What is too much? The last time I checked the tin, maybe 2 weeks before, I thought it seemed light, and then I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe I had taken some out for the plumber. Maybe I had given too much to the church roof fund. Maybe the grandbaby had carried off a 20 in a fist I couldn't pry open without making a scene. You tell yourself anything when the truth is rude and doesn't wipe its feet. I must have made some sound, because Ashley appeared in the doorway like a ghost. silent-footed. Her face was clean, her hair the kind of smooth you buy. She saw me holding the receipt, and the smallest shadow crossed her eyes before she smooth-smiled the way she does for her team meetings. "Oh," she said. "You were going to be part of that conversation." The sentence dropped out of my mouth like a book I hadn't meant to throw. It wasn't the point. I wasn't ready. My fingers trembled and I put the paper down so slow it could count. "It's just a hold," she said. A hand up, palm out, broker of calm. "We hadn't decided. We wanted options. You saw the brochure. You can't keep up this place forever." She gestured around like I was hoarding problem instead of heirlooms. And this would free up everything for all of us. We could afford the daycare that's actually aligned with our values. We could move when the Chicago job comes through. But we can't go anywhere until you're comfortable. And the house is an asset that's just sitting. She smiled again, the smile you give someone you're about to sell on something that's already in motion. "We'll set you up nice, Mags. Those cottages are cute. They have a shuttle to Kroger. Everyone says community is everything at this stage." She leaned one hip into the table and the ring light made her earrings flare white. "This helps everyone. It's smarter." She reached, and before she could close the folder, I laid my palm on the top. My hand looked old next to hers, but it's strong. I've lifted turkeys barehanded and boys with hurt feelings and boxes that say Christmas when it's July and you just need snow somewhere in your life. "You took my money," I said softly, because the softness kept the room from shattering. The sound of the baby's nap machine down the hall was a faint ocean. From my tin. "And it's not like you were going to use it for anything strategic." I thought of gas stations and storms and church ladies whose lights stayed on because someone drove quietly down the street and slipped an envelope into a mailbox and never told anyone. Before I could answer, Daniel's footsteps came up the hall, the soft thud of a man who has never learned how to enter rooms like he belongs in them. He saw us and stopped. Something in his face said he knew exactly where we were in a conversation he had hoped would never happen. "We were going to talk," he said. His eyes went to Ashley's, then back to me, and then settled in a place somewhere in the middle distance, the Switzerland of his gaze. "We've just been waiting for the right time." Daniel put his hand on the back of the chair with the little burn mark and squeezed as if he could hold on to something. "Babe," he said, careful. He has always been careful with matches. "Mom kept us afloat when—" I sat on the step stool in the laundry room where no one bothers to find me quickly. I counted what was left. I had set aside for an emergency dentist for Loretta. She told me not to, I did it anyway. And for a trip I promised myself I'd take to see the ocean outside of crisis. The numbers had meanings like little prayers. Now there were bills missing like teeth. I cried quietly so the house wouldn't hear and start telling secrets to every corner. The next day I told Loretta. We went to the diner with the red vinyl booths where the coffee is always hot and the waitress with the rainbow bracelet calls everyone honey. I told her about the folder and Maple Grove and Chicago and the cash. Loretta's eyes got small, like she was folding the hurt into a place it couldn't spill. "That's a boundary," she said, stabbing the air with a French fry. "You know what that is without me saying it." She leaned in. "If you want me to be the bad guy, I will be the bad guy. I'll pretend I need you to come live with me because my back went out and I can't reach the top cupboard." The ring light malfunctioned and popped like a light bulb, and Ashley cursed in a way that made the baby clap, thinking it was a new song. A man in a blazer came to the door when I was pulling weeds, said he was doing a neighborhood valuation. And could he take 2 minutes of my time? "We're not selling," I told him, and he smiled like he hears that every time. Like no doesn't come with a period anymore. The neighbor across the street asked if we'd be moving on up, because he saw a woman with a camera snapping photos of the front. "Ashley's friend," I said, which was true the way a pothole is a feature of the road. The day of the pot roast, I set the table with the navy blue placemats and my good white plates with the little fluted edges. I polished the forks because polishing is a thing you can finish. The house smelled like onions and thyme, the smell of every apology dinner I have ever made. Outside, the maple leaves were the color of a school bus. My hands moved through the rituals as if they were prayers. Butter on a dish, butter knife set at the diagonal, salt cellar like a small planet. Ashley arrived breathless from a call, set her laptop on my church cookbook again, and made a little face when the stew steam fogged up her screen. "This is why open floor plans are problematic," she murmured, wiping with the bottom of her sweater, and then looked up, smiling thin. "Mags, do you think you could keep the baby's jacket in the mudroom from now on? It smells like dog." The baby, in his high chair, smacked his tray and squealed when I said, "Amen." We passed the rolls. I watched Ashley take only a half and then not eat it. "We're doing low carb," she said like a bulletin. "We have to think about long-term health." She scooted her chair back a little, squared her shoulders, and looked at me over the candlesticks. "We need to talk about the house," she said. No preamble. "Keeping you here keeps all of us stuck. You only hold our lives back." Something in me that had been held, like a breath, like a note in a choir I couldn't leave, let go. "What you're doing isn't sustainable," Ashley continued, not seeing me, seeing only her finish line. "It is not fair for us to forgo opportunities because you don't want change." She lifted the glass of water, took a sip without breaking eye contact, set it down. "We have to think about what is best for our family unit. This house," she gestured, including the walls and the memories like they were just square footage, "isn't a home. It's an anchor. The way you cook, the way you hover, the way you're always underfoot, commenting. It's like we have a third child." She laughed, a little brittle sound. "But we didn't sign up for a third. It held us through Dave's layoffs and my mother's last chemotherapy, and the time Daniel said the word divorce for the first time, testing its weight, then set it down slowly like he didn't want to break it. You would think a person could hear a thing like that and go to pieces, or throw a plate, or leave. I did none of those. I did what women like me do when the pot roast is cooling and the cornbread resents the knife and the baby is going to need a bath. I breathed. Rosemary and regret. I found my spine, which isn't hard to find if you've held a classroom of 8-year-olds quiet for 2 minutes of mindful silence on a rainy day. I looked at my son. His shoulders were up around his ears like he was trying to keep his head from popping off. I looked at the woman he loves. I saw not a monster, but a mirror that only reflects what she wants to see. I saw a child who doesn't know she's afraid. I saw the receipt in my mind's eye, the neat word non-refundable, the reckless assumption that my life is a chip to cash. And then I said the one thing I had never said out loud, "Not in this house, not in this life." And the room went so quiet I could hear the ice maker drop another cube as if our walls had learned to cry. I watched the words land. I watched Ashley's mascara puddle into tiny rivers, watched Daniel's shoulders finally let the shaking happen, watched the baby pause, sensing we'd entered a weather system even his little body knows how to read. But that sentence, and what it broke open, it belongs to what came after. Before that, before the declaration that changed where the story was allowed to go, there was the sound of Ashley breathing too fast, like she'd been running in place for years and only just noticed. There was the sick, sour taste of a non-refundable fee I did not authorize. There was Loretta's voice in my head, sharp as a bell. That's a boundary. And there was the oak table, scuffed, honest, stubborn, witnessing all of it like it has always done, like it will continue to do until I say otherwise. And then, because I am me, I got up and cleared the plates. I stacked them in my hands, the old rhythm that has steadied me through births and deaths and everything in between, and I carried them to the sink. Behind me, Ashley's voice caught and sharpened into something ugly, the final cut she couldn't help but deliver. "You act like a martyr," she spit, words flat but precise, the way she says the names of apps or investors. "But you're just a speed bump." What I said next is the thing that made all of us, even the house, take a breath it will not exhale the same way again. "Get out of my house," I said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words were clean as cold water poured from a pitcher. They were the kind of words you don't unhear. Even the baby went still, hand suspended midair with a pea pinched between 2 fingers, as if he'd sensed a thunderclap but heard only the light. Ashley blinked like someone had shone a flashlight in her eyes. I watched the exact second the sentence landed. It hit her pride, then her plan, then something softer she keeps in a safe beneath her ribs. She laughed once, a brittle sound that had picture frames in it. "Okay," she said, tone thin and bright, the way she is with customer support when the airline loses her luggage. "Okay, this is not productive. Let's take a breath. Nobody is kicking anyone out." The burn mark by my thumb, the water ring, the groove from Daniel's pencil, witnesses. Ashley lifted her glass and set it down hard, as if she could make a ripple in the air that would drown my sentence. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she said, gesturing as if she were presenting at a conference and I was the underperforming quarter. "We need to be adults. We made a plan because we love you. You're reacting. The words had a spine. Opening mail that wasn't yours. Filing an application with my name and my license while telling yourself it was just logistics. The market is softening. We need to hit a specific window. We'll do an as-is option if that's more comfortable, but we need your signature to get the ball rolling. Durable power of attorney. Under that, something with Daniel's name next to mine. Transfer on death beneficiary. Residence. My mouth went dry the way it did when I sang the alto part by accident for a song in soprano. She arranged her face into kindness, but the kindness was pulled too taut. Listen, she said. We make this efficient. We set you up at Maple Grove. You will have friends your age, you will have staff, you won't be doing stairs, and we can, Daniel and I can, take that mental load off. There's a shuttle. There's actually a choir. You would love it. She smiled like a realtor. We can sell this, we can take the equity, and… He rubbed his hand over the burn mark on the chair, worrying it like it might grow into something he could hide behind. Mom, he said, voice pitched careful. Can we, maybe, not escalate? Ash is trying to keep this in a good place. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips and in the tender piece of skin under my watchband. I am not escalating. I am finally standing up. I said his name like a prayer, like the first time I held him, and the nurse asked for it to write on a birth certificate, and I worried I would spell it wrong. Honey, do you believe you can take what isn't yours because you intend to return something like it later? We wanted to be ready to move quickly. This is about timing. If we keep negotiating with feelings, we will be here a year from now and nothing will have progressed. She drew a breath, squared her shoulders. Mags, I need you to be brave with me. Sign the power of attorney tonight so we can take this off your plate. We'll handle everything. We'll stage. We'll pack. We'll move your essentials. You won't have to lift a finger. It will be so much easier for all of us. More than you can count. She slid the papers so the signature lines were just where my hand would fall if I were the woman I was last month. Sign the authorization, she said. Sign the POA. And sign the TOD. It just streamlines probate later. It's a kindness to us. We'll notarize in the morning. I can schedule a mobile notary. She smiled like she'd solved a problem. This is what a good family does. We think ahead. It's when someone calls controlling behavior love and expects you to bless it because they put a bow on top. I looked at Daniel again. His hair fell over his forehead like it did when he was 12, and he wanted bangs but didn't know how to commit. Son, I said. That word made him straighten. Am I hearing right that you want me to sign my home over to your plan tonight because it would be convenient for your wife's career? This is for all of us. We'll get you set up, you'll be safer, you'll have people, we will visit all the time. Will Maple Grove's shuttle bring me to your couch when your marriage is tired, and you need an hour of someone to sit and hold your boy while you take a shower and a breath? I took a breath so deep it polished my ribs. Will the equity in this house pay back the quiet I gave you when you almost didn't graduate because your lab partner quit and you thought it was your fault? I shook my head. You don't have to answer. You already did. If you won't sign, we will have to consider other ways to keep you safe. You would go to a judge, I said even, and tell him I am not competent to decide where I live or how I spend my money. I slid the folder farther from me, the manila catching on a crumb of cornbread. You don't get to hold our love hostage. You don't get to say sign or else you won't see your grandson. And we don't have to do it the hard way. Good, she murmured. I uncapped it and slowly set it beside my plate. Then I picked up the stack of papers, neat edges aligned like people in a family photo where everyone is pretending. I lifted them off the table and held them in my hands. The weight didn't surprise me. Paper can be heavy when it's full of someone else's plans. Then, very carefully, I bent the stack in half. The paper fought for a second, then it gave, crisp. I folded once, then again. It wasn't anger. It was origami. It was a ritual. I folded until the signature lines were swallowed, until the black words that said exclusive and irrevocable were creased into harmlessness. Then I stood, walked to the trash under the sink, and set the little bundle there like compost that will not grow anything good. I didn't drop it. I placed it. I am not dramatic. I am precise. Ashley made a noise like a cat that's been surprised by its own shadow. She stood so fast her chair barked against the floor. "What are you doing?" she snapped even. The shine was gone. The conference tone was gone. Her Ohio professor voice was back. Flat, plain, sharp. "That is not yours to—" I folded the runner the way my mother taught me to fold a tablecloth so it does not crease where the company can see. Then I put it in her lap. This is mine, I said again. My house, my table, my mail, the cash my mother taught me to keep behind flour and faith. She reached across, fast, for the Maxwell House can on the counter where I had set it behind the basket. I don't know if she thought she could reclaim the money inside or prove a point, or simply put her hand on the thing she had already, in some secret part of herself, decided was hers. I moved faster. My palm landed on the lid with a thud that startled the baby into an "oh" sound. The lid rang, dull tin. "Do not touch that," I said. The space between our hands was a hot inch of air. "Do not ever touch that again." I turned to him again because I had to. When you raise a boy, you teach him to look at you and hold a question in his gaze. "Daniel," I said. He looked up. "I love you more than I love my good knife, and I love that knife. I taught you to say please and thank you, and I taught you not to take the last brownie if you didn't leave one for someone else. Your wife stole from me and called it strategy. She filled out a form with my name on it and paid a deposit with cash she did not ask to borrow. She threatened to take me to court so a stranger could strip me of my decisions. Do you think this is okay?" "I think," he started, wiping a hand under his eye like he could erase the wet, "we are all not at our best right now. Kindness that will not draw a line is not kindness. It is permission." I walked into the living room and opened the drawer where she'd laid the paper turkey photo face down like it was a scandal. I took it out and set it back on the mantel above the fireplace, next to the pinecone angel Jeremy brought me from Vacation Bible School in '97. Ashley watched me like I was throwing a grenade. "We talked about minimizing visual clutter," she said, strangled. We agreed. Ashley took a small step toward it like you do when you see a baby fall. "Don't," she said, and then stopped because I wasn't doing anything wrong. "It's time for you to pack your work things from my dining room," I said. "Take your cords off my chairs. Take your notes off my window. Put your microfiber flags in your bag. Tonight, you and Daniel will sleep at an Airbnb or at your friend Hannah's, or at a hotel where the carpet smells like lemon because it has been vacuumed properly by someone who takes pride in their job. Tomorrow, we will speak with daylight in the room and other ears, because secrets make people foolish, and daylight makes fools either sit down or leave. Sweetie," I said to him because babies are only eavesdropping by accident, "you are safe. Your grandmother loves you so much. You will go with your mama and daddy now to have a bath at a place where the towels all match." He smiled like he does when the light is right and his ears are clean. The sound my heart made was not a sound you can hear without living in my skin. Ashley's eyes were wet now for real, but there was steel under it. "If we leave, she said, chin up. "We leave for good. And when we go to Chicago, we are not going to turn our lives upside down to be at your beck and call. Don't expect us to drive down for Thanksgiving to sit at your precious table like nothing happened. Don't expect us to let you insert yourself. We will build the family we want. I have been pulled up and dragged and dropped overboard more times than you will ever know. I do not intend to be used as ballast for your flight." She opened her laptop, the sleek black mirror that reflects only what you want it to, and she clicked fast. An email popped up. The subject line had my name in it next to the words listing prep. She typed without looking up. "No," I said, and the word clicked the air off. "Close your computer. We already have the photographer scheduled, and I won't be the person who wastes vendor time because someone decided to have a mood. Do not touch my—" "You would call the police," she said, disbelief and contempt braided. "Yes," I said, "and the bank, and Maple Grove, to ask them who told them they could accept a hold fee from someone other than the applicant. And Mary Ann, to ask her what she thinks about PR when a story like this gets into ears that wear pearls on Sundays. And your HR, should they need to see how you handle consent and boundaries in your personal life, since they seem to leak into your work. I am done being quiet so your plan can move fast. If we give an inch, she will never move. We will be facilitating the very behavior we need to. This will not be one." The baby reached out to me, instinct and routine and love all braided in that little hand, and I kissed his palm. "I love you," I whispered into skin that still smelled like his nap. "I will see you soon. You will always know me. That is a promise I can keep. You have always had choices. They just don't all get you the life you drew on a whiteboard." She was halfway over the threshold when she turned back, her face composed again. The PR layer flicked on. She reached into her bag and, without breaking eye contact, pulled out one more paper. She laid it on the entryway table, on top of the bowl with the keys. The pen appeared again in her hand like a magician's coin. "One last time," she said. Sign the transfer on death. It doesn't affect anything now. It's just smart. You can't argue that, Mags. The pen clicked. The point gleamed. If you love Daniel, if you love us, you will do this one decent thing. It will take 2 seconds. You are dying on the smallest hill. For the last time that night, I put the question on the table like bread for anyone hungry for truth. Daniel, I said, gentle but not yielding, do you believe I owe you my house? It would make everything simpler, he whispered. Nothing worth keeping is simple, I said, and I am not a problem to solve. She took the halves from my hand with fingers that didn't touch mine. She folded them without looking and tucked them into her bag like a receipt she'd deal with later. Okay, she said. Her voice was flat. Okay. He looked back at me, and in his eyes there was a boy with a turkey on his head and a man with a mortgage, and a woman at his side he chose and a table where all of it had been allowed to exist at once. He opened his mouth. Mom, he said. I know, I said. It was the only thing that covered all of it. Go. I stood in the entryway with the keys bowl and the torn paper and the smell of time still in the air, and I felt the kind of quiet that is not absence, but a room exhaling. I went back to the table. I picked up the navy placemats and shook them like small flags, released the breadcrumbs of a war I hadn't wanted and had finally walked into. I wiped the table. Gentle, moved the sponge in circles over the dark ring that will be there until the next woman in this house sands the surface or lets it be. I put the turkey picture back center on the mantel and the circle and square print in the hall where it could consider something besides the heart of the house. I set the Maxwell House can in the back of the cupboard and put a casserole dish in front of it, because I didn't trust the fact of its hiding yet. Then I sat down with my phone and my fingers shook a little, but not from fear. I texted Loretta 3 words she would hear like a psalm. Need a witness. She sent back a thumbs up and the little running lady. Then I dialed Maple Grove. The woman answered with a smile in her voice and I removed it with mine. My name is Margaret Ellison, I said. I need to speak to someone about a hold placed on a cottage without my consent. I said consent like it had teeth. She put me on hold and the music was the same bland piano as always, and I let it wash over me without making me soft. When she came back, I asked for email addresses and policies and names like beads on a rosary. Then I called the bank and asked for new passwords and a note on my account. I called the doctor's office and set an appointment for a wellness check I didn't need but would have, written in a neat hand in my file. I sent an email to our pastor with the subject line past time. I breathed. I wrote down the calls in a spiral notebook with a blue pen that didn't skip. There is a kind of grief that is a to-do list. It will keep you upright. After the house had heard me call, after it understood I was not just noise but a decision, I washed the dishes. Warm water, good sponge, plates tilted in a row like choir members. The baby's tray, sticky with peach sugar, came clean with more effort than it had taken to get it dirty. I dried things with a towel that had daisies stitched into the edge by a woman I loved who died last year, and I thought, I am not done being useful. I am not done building. Not on your whiteboard, Ashley. Here. When it was quiet enough to hear the clock in the hallway, not the one that ticks, but the one that waits and then says what time it is with a sound like a bell borrowed from a bigger life, I sat again. I put my hands on the table. I felt the grain. I thought of anchors and boats and all the things that hold without shouting about it. And I said, to the room, to myself, to the woman I would have to be tomorrow when the door opened and life came in making all kinds of noise. No. I said it again. I said it until it felt like a full sentence and not just a word. That was the night my son and his wife left my house like it could survive without them, which it can. That was the night I did not sign the thing that would have made me a ghost in my own life. That was the night I told a grown woman to leave and meant it in all the right ways. That was the night I turned a drawer full of rubber bands and screws into a line in the sand. That was the night my heart learned a new hymn, written in the key of boundaries. And it sounded like the truth. By 11, the street outside was quiet. The kind of quiet you get in our part of Columbus when the Buckeyes aren't playing, and the neighbors are home, and nobody needs anything from anyone they don't already have. The maple tree glittered with streetlight. The house, old, honest, stubborn, breathed with me. Then the doorbell rang. I froze, mid-wipe on the last plate, the good one with the fluted edge. I dried my hands. I walked to the door, and there she was on the stoop, Ashley, face washed of anger, hair smooth, eyes rimmed with something like desperation worn thin. She held up the folder, which she had smoothed as much as a person can smooth something you tore on purpose. "One more thing," she said, and the words were small and sharp as tacks. "Since you're feeling so strongly about boundaries. If you won't sign, if you're choosing to dig in and make this messy, then at least do something decent. Write us a check tonight for the hold fee from your little stash. Reimburse us the $1,500. It's the least you can do. We did it for you. You can do this for us. Or," she lifted her chin, daring, "or hand over the can." "No," I said, and my voice didn't flutter. "No to the check, no to the can, no to the idea that you get to frame theft as generosity. The answer is no." The house was still. The table was mine. My hands were steady. Outside, the maple shook and let a leaf go, gold against dark, and it fell where it was supposed to. Inside, the line I had drawn held. The words I had said did not blow away. They stayed. They made the air a place I could live. The house slept with me that night in a way it hadn't in months. Not because the argument had been spectacular. I've seen more noise in a knitting circle. It slept because a line had been drawn, and the house, being made of wood and old stitches of life, recognized a new rule to live by. I lay awake longer than usual. Old people do sometimes, and imagined the table in the morning light, the burn mark like a freckle on a face I know the contours of. When the sun came, it came the honest way it always has, through the slatted shade, across the place where Daniel's pencil had once dug in too hard. Loretta was the first one I told in detail. I'd already texted her, "Need a witness," and she arrived with coffee and a thermos of something that smelled like cinnamon, and a confidence that smelled like peppermint gum. We sat at my kitchen table, two women who keep lists like prayers, and I told her everything again, because the telling tightens the rope and makes it useful. "You called them?" she asked, meaning Maple Grove, meaning the bank, meaning anything that looks like a face on the other end of a phone that could be made to hear you. "I did," I said. I had called the bank and Maple Grove before I let myself cry. But after Loretta's second cup, I did the thing I'd been putting off. I went to the phone book, yes, the paper one, in the kitchen drawer, and called a lawyer. Not because I wanted swords, but because I wanted someone who knew the boundaries to write them down with authority. Loretta squeezed my hand and said, "Good. That's a line you can cash." She was patient and asked me to go through what I had: the manila folder, the Maple Grove brochure tucked into the recycling, the receipt with non-refundable hold fee, and my name typed on it, the Maxwell House can, and the holes where the money used to sit. I handed Marta photocopies I made on my little scanner, the only modern thing I've learned to love, and she took notes in a handwriting that looked like a promise. "You have 3 things we can use right away," she said, like a person who's used to making lists where hope is a checkmark. 1, there's potential theft or conversion of funds when she used cash that was yours without authorization. 2, there's misrepresentation and possible identity misuse if they submitted your driver's license or your name without your consent. 3, there is a document trail: the folder, the emails, the receipt, the realtor communications. We'll collect it all and give it to the police. I'll draft a demand letter to Ashley and Daniel and to Maple Grove, and we'll file a formal complaint. If they don't cooperate, we ask for an emergency protective order. We can stop any attempted real estate transfer because you are the property owner and no sheriff is going to let someone sell a house without your signature. Can they actually take me to court? She mentioned conservatorship. When we file, we can include a request for the court to deny any petitions until a formal evaluation is done. That will buy you time and keep people from moving forward on a plan that ranks your wishes third. She wanted screenshots of texts I'd seen, the emails on Ashley's laptop I'd glimpsed before I closed it, and the realtor's listing email I had closed with my hand. She told me she'd call Maple Grove herself to request their records and place the institution on notice that a hold had been placed by a third party, and that we intended to pursue legal remedies if it wasn't refunded. She promised to go to the police with me, to file a report for theft and potential identity misuse, and to have an investigator, if necessary, pull phone logs. I left Marta's office feeling less light than taut, like a string tightened across a harp. It would sing when played right. Loretta drove me home, and on the way, she talked through the practicalities as if she'd been waiting her whole life to be a logistics person for a friend in need. "You'll need clothes for 2 days at my place and your slippers. I brought your toothbrush. Don't be offended, and I'll babysit your lines of communication. Let them stew in their own soup. When you prove the stew's poisoned, no one in town will want to eat it with them. I packed a small bag, comfortable dresses, my church shoes, the towel Loretta likes to call my good bad towel because it's soft but stained, and I took the turkey picture off the mantel because it had made its rounds and it deserved to be near me. Loretta helped me tuck the Maxwell House can out of view, this time behind a cookbook and a casserole dish, and she kept the can's lid closed like a secret. The next morning, I walked into the police station with Marta beside me. The woman at the front desk had a badge like a small, serious flower. She took my statement and told me to sit while an officer reviewed it. After that, a detective named Raul Martinez came to my interview room. He wore a cardigan under his jacket and asked if I took sugar in my coffee. If that doesn't tell you anything about a man, it tells you he's meant for small towns and big problems. I handed him images of the receipt and the folder and the note I'd found, auto pay, and he noted the non-refundable hold fee and the amount of $500. He asked the same questions everyone in authority asks, and did so kindly. Who had access to the house? Who knew about your tin? Had you given permission to anyone? Had you ever had disputes about money before? He listened when I told him about the mail, about the sticky note on the pantry, about the way the photo of Daniel with the paper turkey had been taken down and put away, and how small decisions had become a rearrangement of the furniture of my life. "This is a police matter," he said finally, not impatiently. "This looks like conversion and possible identity misuse. We will file this and investigate. We will speak with Maple Grove and request their payment logs and any forms they received. If they accepted a hold based on information that suggests the applicant was not the payer or lacked consent, that's something they'll want to resolve quickly." Detective Martinez called Maple Grove the same day and asked them to preserve records and hold the funds pending inquiry. I called my bank again and asked them to note my account for suspicious activity and to change the questions for identity verification. Marta put in for the emergency protective order. She filed an affidavit asserting that Ashley had taken funds and attempted to move me out through coercive means, and that immediate relief was appropriate to prevent further irreparable harm. Then, because life is not only paperwork, but also the muscle memory of living, I did what Loretta said and went away for a few nights. I slept on her couch, in a blanket with a smiley face someone had embroidered in red thread. I attended a small Wednesday choir practice with women who make their times at church like appointments with joy. I walked the park where the river is and spat out the word peace like a pebble and felt it sink. Stepping away was not running. It was creating space for evidence to breathe and for people who had made a plan to show their hands. They did. In the days I was gone, the house sent me messages like a clairvoyant. Emails from the realtor asking for more photos, a ping from Ashley's workplace that suggested HR had received an anonymous note. Marta had warned them she might reach out after this complaint, and a text from Daniel that read, "We need to talk when you're ready." I didn't answer all of them. Some things need to be recorded and some things need to be waited on. Marta worked like a concert master. She subpoenaed recordings from Maple Grove's front office. They're often cooperative when fraud is mentioned. Rules make establishments nervous. She asked for copies of the application they had on file, the receipt details, and any ID they retained. Maple Grove sent a polite email and then a different tone, an apology and a statement that they had accepted the hold but were reevaluating once our representation contacted them. The director, an earnest woman named Carla, came to speak with Marta in the lawyer's office and to send me a message. "We take consent very seriously. If we processed a hold without the applicant's explicit consent, we will refund immediately and we will review our intake practices." The letter they signed indicated they were forwarding the funds back into their operations as a hold pending resolution. They also sent a formal confirmation that they would not honor any sale or transfer until the rightful owner, me, gave written, notarized consent. A week after I left to sleep on my friend's couch, Detective Martinez called. "We have a statement from an employee at Maple Grove who said Ms. Ash," he corrected himself politely, "Ms. Ashley called asking if someone could place a hold. The hold was accepted by staff when a copy of a driver's license was supplied. There's irregularity in how the license was supplied. The signature on the application doesn't match Mrs. Ellison's. We'd like to speak with Ms. Ashley and Mr. Daniels. We have to start with interviews." His voice was calm. He had that kind of patient forwardness police are trained in. Not a charge, not yet, but a net they were throwing. When Marta told me that, my chest unclenched like a fist letting go of a stone. The world does not always have to go through fire to become a different metal. Sometimes an audit and a subpoena and a detective who will call you back are enough. During this time, Ashley did not stay still. She called and texted me with a cold politeness that felt almost rehearsed. She posted carefully phrased content about family decisions and respect for elders on social media that read like a press release for a life she wanted to sell at a profit. Her employer's HR department, which is careful because it manages people whose careers hinge on optics, received Marta's letter and opened an inquiry into workplace conduct. The company asked Ashley to put her role on temporary leave pending the HR review. I did not wish that on anyone for sport, but when a person weaponizes boundaries as leverage, there must be consequences beyond the household. Then, as Marta had predicted, her hard edge softened and she made missteps. In a call that later was recorded in an HR email, she called the realtor's office and used language that suggested she had authority to prepare the house for listing. The realtor, in a polite and nervous tone, advised her that the owner must sign. That call, recorded, was not helpful to her position. She texted Daniel things that implied they would proceed no matter what, and those texts, saved by the detective, became evidence of intent. Daniel, this is where your story shifted in the way a tide changes when the moon is near. He had been moving between loyalties like a man pacing a thin ledge. The night before I returned, he sat on his porch and called me. "Mom?" he said, voice broken the way a kite string snaps when it's been cut by a nail. Can I come by? I need to talk." Under questioning, Daniel's answer was quieter than an apology, but truer. He admitted the hold had been placed, that Ashley had made the calls and planned the listing, and that he had been persuaded by the logic of risk management and opportunity. He also said something that made me ache. She made it sound urgent, like a moment would be lost. I thought I was helping everyone. The words weren't a defense. They were a note played after a wrong chord. When I returned, home, not back to the couch at Loretta's, but back to my kitchen with its coffee tin and the turkey picture back on its hook, I did so with documents in my handbag like talismans. I had a police report number. I had email confirmations from Maple Grove acknowledging the situation and refunding the hold fee. I had a written statement from the realtor retracting any listing initiation and confirming they would not proceed without my signature. Marta had also filed for an order, not yet a conservatorship. Marta laughed soft at the moral panic of that thought, but an emergency court order enjoining any attempt to dispose of my property or to interfere with my personal affairs. The order was temporary, but it carried weight. It required Ashley and Daniel to stay away from trying to place any holds, to stop communicating with Maple Grove about listing, and to cease attempts to access my funds. The court had signed it after Marta presented the evidence, and the affidavit alleging conversion and coercion. The judge had seen Maggie's handwriting and my bank statements, and decided not to let anything move until a hearing. That is the document of power the world likes to respect, a judge's signature. You can see it in the way people's faces change when you show them a piece of paper with a courthouse's stamp. It is not the only power, of course, but when the law puts a hand on a situation and says, no, other hands are more likely to listen. I invited them back to the table for what turned into a small, formal meeting. Marta sat with me to the left, her legal pad like a shield. Detective Martinez sat across from her. His presence made the room feel like a place where facts come to rest. I kept my hands on the oak the way I always have, feeling the old groove near the edge, a geography of our life. When Ashley walked in, she was not the woman who had barged out of the doorway before. She was smaller, which is sometimes the mercy of consequence. Daniel's face showed the cost of a man who realized his bigness has limits. Marta spoke plainly. She read from the order. By the authority vested in this court, the defendant shall not attempt to withdraw funds from the plaintiff's possession, shall not submit forms for the sale or transfer of plaintiff's property, and shall not file or commence proceedings to limit plaintiff's legal capacity. She placed the signed, stamped order on the table where the paper received its own type of sunlight. "This is temporary," she said. "On the hearing day, we'll examine the full circumstances. If you have a different plan, you can present it then. But until the court says otherwise, Ms. Ellison decides what happens to her home and her life." "We notified Maple Grove," Marta continued. "Maple Grove has verified the hold and will not proceed. They are cooperating. We filed a request for refund and the hold will be reversed. Detective Martinez has begun a review of whether a criminal charge is appropriate. If it is, that is between the state and Ms. Ashley. But the court's concern is immediate harm. Mrs. Ellison, whatever conversations you wish to have with your son and his wife, do so on terms you set." That's what the order preserves. But there were moments. When Marta read a few of Ashley's recorded calls to the realtor about scheduling photography, And when the detective read an excerpt of the text to Daniel referencing the non-refundable payment, where her face reconfigured into shame. "What do you want from me?" she asked at last. It came out small and lonesome. What I wanted was clear in my mind. The money returned, a public retraction of any statements implying consent, an apology to my face and my sons, and a promise they would not try to wrest a life out of my hands again. I also wanted to teach my grandson, in that careful way children learn, that adults can be wrong and they must be held accountable. But I wanted dignity first, for myself and for my household. Marta's voice was the same, firm and fair. "We can resolve this without court," she said. "If you refund the $2,500 to Ms. Ellison, if you withdraw any claims of consent, and if you agree to the temporary restraining provisions while we move to a civil hearing, the state may elect not to pursue criminal charges. It's best all around." He stood up, went to me, and wrapped his arms around me the way you'd wrap a child who is learning to carry big feelings. "Mom," he said into my hair, "I'm sorry. I should have said no sooner. I let her stripe our life with a plan and forgot to make you part of it." "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said. "I thought I was saving all of us. I see now I crossed a line. I'm sorry." They signed in the presence of Detective Martinez an agreement to attend mediation and to participate in counseling to examine how they use urgency as leverage. Daniel spoke again, this time to Marta and then to me. "I want to learn to be better," he said. "I don't want to be the son who uses kindness as a swivel door for other people's convenience. I want to be someone who defends his mother." Marta filed the necessary documents to keep the restraining provisions in place until our civil hearing, which we scheduled a few weeks out. It all felt both small and large at once. Small because it was administrative, large because each nod from an institution was a rope tied to my steadiness. When the court date came, there was no dramatic courtroom scene. There was a woman with a badge, a judge who read the facts, and a settlement that included an agreement Ashley and Daniel signed. Restitution for the hold fee, acknowledgement that no consent had been given for any application for my cottage, and an agreement to attend family counseling. The judge approved the temporary order and set a follow-up to ensure compliance. It was legal, sober, and final enough for the purpose at hand. Victory in this case did not come as a headline. It came as a series of small administrative decisions that, taken together, restored my rights. The document of power, the signed court order, was the one thing Ashley hadn't anticipated. It had teeth. It had the authority to stop the train before it left the station. That was the part I did not feel guilty about. There is a fierce mercy in preventing someone from being used. You don't micromanage a kindness into a chain. After the paperwork was filed and the last signature wet with ink, Daniel asked if we could talk privately. He took me out on the back patio where the maple cast shade like a legitimate blessing. He put his hands in his pockets like a boy embarrassed and admitted he'd felt ashamed knowing he'd let me be diminished. He promised, carefully, without making vows that live on paper more than in effort, that he would attend counseling with Ashley and that he would make a clear plan for how to include me in any future conversations about our family's logistics. He said the words I'd been waiting for. "You're my mother. You have your life. I will not treat it like a line item on a spreadsheet." Pastor Jim stopped by and blessed the meal, and then hung around long enough to sing an off-key hymn with the choir ladies, which made everyone giggle. Daniel and Ashley came, not in the stupefied choreography of the old days, but with a certain care in their movement, as if they were learning how to inhabit respect. Ashley brought a bouquet and left it in a vase by the window. She apologized again in front of Loretta, in front of Pastor Jim, in front of the small table that had, for decades, held our family stories. I wanted the night to be quiet and ordinary. I cooked. I set the navy placemats and used the cork runner for the last time. The runner had held a different residence than mine, and I wanted to mark its closing. And I put the turkey picture like a crown in the middle of the mantle. I lit a candle, not because the law needed ritual, but because my soul did. I served the food, and we ate, and we told stories that left laughter like confetti on our plates. At one point, I stood, old habit, and thanked everyone for coming. I talked about mercy and accountability as if they were dishes you pass around. After everyone had left, I stood in the kitchen at the window above the sink, and I took the Maxwell House can out from behind the casserole dish. I didn't do anything dramatic. I set it on the table and unscrewed the lid. I put back in only a small portion of the cash, some for the dentist fund and a little for a trip to the ocean I'd promised myself. And I wrote a note that said, in my handwriting that has been knit with the years, "Do not touch." Then I put the can back where it belonged, not hidden in fear this time, but honored. Because money is a tool, not an altar. I did one more thing, for myself and for the house. I took a sanding block. My father would have smiled that I still have the tool he used. And I rubbed a gentle circle around the scorch mark on the table. I didn't try to make it vanish. I only wanted to smooth the edges, to let the wood breathe. I oiled the table with a rag and sat and watched the grain drink it in. It felt like a little blessing. The oak had held our stories. It would continue to do so. We had learned, all of us, how to live with rules. When I closed the kitchen that night and took a breath, I felt something return to me that had been misplaced. The sense that my life was mine to steward, that love does not mean surrendering your legal name or your savings can. There is a difference between holding someone tight because they belong and holding them tight because you've used them as an anchor you don't know how to lift. I have always prided myself on being useful. Now I know how to be useful with boundaries intact. If this story reached you, if it sat in your chest like a question mark, then let it be a small map. Boundaries are not unkind. They are care practiced with edges. And sometimes justice arrives not as a shout but as a stack of papers and a judge's pen and the deliberate footsteps of people pulling back from harm. If this touched you, if it made you think of a grandmother's kitchen or a friend in a small town or your own Maxwell house can somewhere in the back of a cupboard, leave a like. If you have a story about a boundary you drew or wish you had drawn, tell me in the comments. Where do you draw the line with family? What does forgiveness look like after a betrayal? And if you want more stories about ordinary people finding their voice and their rights, subscribe. I'd love to hear how you handle the quiet and the loud of family, and I promise to keep telling the kinds of stories that end with people finding themselves again.